Hi, this is Mr. Nobody doing another quick book review for you. This won't take too long. This is David Berlinski, The Devil's Delusion, Atheism and Its Scientific Pretensions. It's an interesting book. If you don't know who he is, he's a secular Jew, and he's interesting because he's agnostic. He's atheism critical. So he's interested in that way. Interesting in that way because he comes to the question more from a philosophical standpoint of just saying, your position isn't as strong as you think it is. You're being just as philosophical as some other people. You're making assumptions. There's been a number of books written like this. I've even been given some of them by my brother. My brother's a doctor, and he is religious. He's a Christian. He's also a pastor. And so I know that it's hard for him sometimes because he does experience a certain amount of pushback against his faith. And he likes reading books that support him in that. Now, this is a good book. It is a subject that really needs to be tackled. And part of it has to do with this question. It's something that Kierkegaard and some other people tackled of, is there really such a thing as a default position or a position from which you can look at the world where you have to take no faith positions, where you don't have to stake your life on anything, where you make no assumptions? And of course, various philosophers would say, no, there actually isn't a position like that. You are in that position no matter what, because you're human. And so science itself as a technique is not an escape or a solution to larger philosophical questions. And I would say David Berlinski is sort of making that point, and does make the point that science also has philosophical assumptions on which it rests, including philosophical assumptions that can be challenged or could be incorrect, and that a lot of these questions can't themselves be solved by science itself within itself. Now, I was lucky. I had a professor who was very good on this subject. He was my epistemology professor. He was himself, I believe, an atheist, but boy, was he awesome at really being honest and spreading the philosophical skepticism and saying you couldn't take things for granted. And yeah, he was amazing at he would just as quickly tear to pieces the easy epistemological confidence of scientifically minded people and materialist minded people as religious people. He said philosophy can be used. I can tear all of this apart. No one's standing on ground they don't have to think about or defend. And this is sort of the point of this book, The Devil's Delusion, is the idea of there isn't some default or space that you don't have to defend. You actually do have to defend whatever space you're in. Now, if I had any criticism of this book, like I said, it's not against science. It's against the argument that science, atheism's position is proved by science and therefore can just be defaulted to. That's the argument at core of this. If I had a major criticism of this book, it is that he is way too witty. It is like Mel Brooks and these other quick-witted Jewish guys who have a wonderful sense of humor. They're so clever. They're so verbose. His verbal ability, his sense of that dry sarcasm, that East Coast sarcasm, it's astounding. But the problem is, and I often thought this, I can't actually tell whether you're making good arguments because you're making them with so much wit and cleverness. Like, I don't really know if you're actually winning these points that you're setting out to tackle because you're so funny and so clever in your responses to them that I genuinely feel like it's obscuring my ability to evaluate the arguments. So that would be my major argument against this book. It is funny. It is interesting. I actually don't think it is a great treatment to the subject. It is not necessarily what I would go to unless you already agreed with him, because he's just too rhetorically brilliant. And that's basically what I have to say about this book. Read it if you're interested, but I would not personally make use of these arguments because I find them too rhetorical. And I think it's unfair when you're as funny and witty as he is to lean overmuch on those talents. And that's all for today.